Salam alaikum, shalom aleichem, sastrikale, namaskar, good evening, and peace and blessings unto all of you. My name is Professor Saeed Khan, and it is my distinct pleasure to be your MC for the evening. Welcome everyone to the 8th Annual Awards Fundraiser and Friendraiser. Thank you for joining us and supporting the Interfaith Leadership Council. I hope you're all well. I hope you are keeping warm and you are keeping safe. We have a wonderful lineup tonight. We will be starting with a series of interfaith invocations, followed by a word from our IFLC president. And next, we will see videos from our award recipients about their journeys in interfaith work. And lastly, we will hear from our insightful keynote speaker, Mr. John Powell. Now, the IFLC has set a rather outrageous and audacious 2021 goal of raising $150,000. Now, a far wiser person than I once called it the audacity of hope, so we hope to be as audacious with our goals here tonight. And yet, when we look at our programming and the changes that were forced upon us this year, it is necessary. I want to assure you that the IFLC uses its donations very wisely, and most of our resources actually come in the form of thousands of hours that are devoted and dedicated by our involved volunteer board and many other volunteer committee members and partners. And I'd like to take a special moment now to give thanks to Joanna Anderson for her producing and directing this online event. And as you'll see, it's a wonderful program and certainly took quite a bit of effort and commitment to put it together. So thank you again, Joanna. The IFLC's largest program is Religious Diversity Journeys, which seeks to teach understanding while combating bigotry and bullying by taking 7th graders to local places of worship and museums. In the past, that program provided a revenue stream that came close to covering our RDJ program costs. Then the pandemic forced us to redesign and transform into formats that could be streamlined online. And I know most of us are spending our lives online these days, this evening being no exception. However, the income was diminished, and there were new costs that were related and involved. If you get a chance, please check out the broadcast on DPTV's One Detroit program to see our exceptional video content. The IFLC has had to dip into its rainy day funds and needs to raise significant funds so as not to go into the red. IFLC's mission is vitally important and requires expanded programming and partnerships with you. Helping our community to see the value added by our diversity is the interfaith vision of supporting democracy. Every voice needs to be respectfully heard, and we have a lot of work to do. You will hear from all of our outstanding award recipients tonight that each one of them believes we all have more work that we can do together. IFLC has an important role to that effort. Consequently, the IFLC wants to expand programming and outreach, which requires a professional staff person. This will help coordinate our efforts much more optimally. So we need to raise and reach that 2021 goal of $150,000, along with the continued contributions of time and talent of our board, of our volunteers, to fulfill our plans together. Thank you for your contributions and interests, and we all have a role to play in this. We hope tonight to raise some more money toward that objective. So just look on your screen to the left, and you'll notice that there's a donate button. So you can donate any time during the program that you like up till 9:30 p.m., like even now, if you can. And now we have the opportunity to reflect on our community and our interfaith values with invocations. We shall be hearing from Reverend Jimmy Wafer, the pastor of the new Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, from Narayanaswamy Sangagiri, who is the chair of the Outreach Committee of the Bharatiya Temple, and by Rabbi Marla Hornston, who is the Associate Rabbi of Temple Israel.
For being here. It's a great day. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this opportunity that you have given us. You have given us an opportunity to be together virtually in the midst of some trying times, in the midst of a pandemic that's restrictive, and in the midst of the other nation that we're concerned about, where there's inclement and weather that's devastating. So we thank you. So grateful that you allowed all of us to come together, of different viewpoints, different thoughts, different tongues, and different sights. We all see you differently and we see each other differently. And we are so grateful and thankful. So now we come for this virtual gathering of IFLC, and we thank you. Touch our hearts and our minds that we may come together as a diverse group of people to see you differently and to hear an articulation of your goodness through various tongues, that we may be able to see you fully and understand greater who you are, and then realize the great needs in which we are able and capable of addressing with your help. So dear God, help us this day. Help this to be a successful venture, that we might provide help for those who are so dear to our hearts, the children and others, and help us to come closer together. For you have said, how can we love you with all our heart if we are not capable of extending that great love to each other? So we thank you for the opportunity. In the name of our Savior, we pray. Amen.
Namaste. Om Gananam tva Ganapatigim Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatana Shrunvannotiभिः Sadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. O Lord, as the leader of all divine beings, we praise you and invite you. You are supreme intelligence among all intellects. You possess unequaled glory. You are the King of Kings. You are the Lord of the Vedas. Please listen to our entreaty and bless us speedily. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. He is complete. This creation is complete. From him, this creation has emerged. But even when this completeness is taken out from that completeness, still he remains complete, intact. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. This coming together, let us be protected. Let us be nourished. Let our collaboration be fruitful. Let this exercise enhance our individual energies. Let this not be a cause of difference among us. Peace, peace, peace.
God, source of creation, source of community and humanity. Today I am grateful for the silver linings that make us appreciate the little things. Today I am grateful for the little things that have transformed into important lessons. And today I am grateful for the important lessons that inspire us to work for justice and right. We are living in interesting times, that is for sure. And while it feels more intense to us than ever, I'm sure that every generation feels as if the world is broken. From the time of the 16th century mystics who sought to repair the world through acts of tikkun olam, acts of righteousness and justice, until this very day. And yet, I am grateful for the silver linings that made me appreciate how important it is that we come together. Surely it's not the same when we appear to each other as individual boxes on the screen, and yet we have found ways to transcend Zoom so that we are more than pixels, we are people. And using this technology is our means to connect with one another. And this connection makes all the difference. When we join together and build relationships, 1-on-1 and 2-by-2 and so on, when we know our neighbors and our neighbors become friends, when we unite in our commonalities, when we celebrate our differences, when we see the good and strive for what is right and just, it is then that we see the cracks begin to heal and the world becomes whole. Dear God, we are grateful for the opportunity to be your partner in creating and healing this world. We have learned that it only works when we do it together, as we strengthen our bonds to one another, as we appreciate what each of us brings to this holy work, as we build relationships, community, and understanding to repair the world as our ancestors taught in ancient days. We are grateful to you, O God, for the silver linings, for the important lessons, and for the inspiration to work for justice, which we will all continue to do together. Amen.
Thank you again, Reverend Dr. Jimmy Wafer, to Narayana Swami Naga Sankagiri, and to Rabbi Marla Hornston for your wonderful and inspiring words of wisdom and hope as we are here tonight and together. I would like now to turn it over to our IFLC president, Ms. Raman Singh.
Good evening and welcome to our 8th annual awards gathering. This is a very different and special year, and in some ways a very difficult year for many. And we are grateful that you have taken the time out to join us this evening. We are particularly grateful to our sponsors and our participants. This is a first time for IFLC doing this in a digital format, and we ask for your forgiveness in advance for any technical difficulties that might occur. We miss seeing each other in person and having those conversations and contacts, but I know you will enjoy our wonderful speaker and the rest of the evening. As many of you know, the Interfaith Leadership Council came together in the wake of the events of September 11th, 2001. And ever since then, we have been devoted to our mission of connection, conciliation, education, and communication, with the goal of a more harmonious and beloved community. To continue this work that impacts thousands of children and adults each year, we truly need your support. We hope that you will make a donation this evening of any size that fits in your budget. I now invite you to enjoy a video of some of our programming highlights. And again, please consider making that donation to continue supporting that programming. Good evening.
What we do during Religious Diversity Journeys is take 25 students per school district on religious immersion experiences to different houses of worship throughout Metro Detroit. They visit a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a Hindu temple, a Sikh Gurdwara, and we have a summation activity either at the Detroit Institute of Arts or the Holocaust Memorial Center.
The faith community specifically has an opportunity to help remind all of us that God's creations to be treasured and cared for. And so when we think about caring for the planet, we spent an inordinate amount of time figuring out what would a company who has taken a stand for a triple bottom line do that cares for this great creation.
If I lived alone, whose feet will I wash? So my involvement in the interfaith community for the last almost 50 years have made me a better priest for my people.
It would be an interesting podcast episode to talk about how would you define religion in general.
You know, today it's about controlling the environment for our kids and their families. It's about putting them in a positive, structured environment that allows them to develop in anything that they love to do. Not every kid likes basketball or sports, so we have a computer lab. And we have STEAM programs, and we have 300 programs a year where they can come and volunteer and help feed the homeless. You know, so we try to open up these opportunities to help define who we are, what we do, and why, so that they become a part of that. So it's molded into them as well.
What it means to be an American. We have in our First Amendment free exercise of religion. And to me, that means that people of all faith and no faith are welcomed. And it starts at the very local level. And that our group, through its shape-shifting, its events, its programming, allows anyone in this community who participates in one of our programs or events to feel welcome. And that's how you build a stronger community, a healthier community.
Well, we hope you enjoyed seeing a glimpse, and mind you, that was really just a glimpse as to what IFLC accomplishes every year. Another way to contribute today is to buy your raffle tickets now on the left of your screen for a chance to win hundreds of dollars in Amazon gift cards. One ticket is $5, or you can buy 5 tickets for $20. You have until 9:30 p.m. to purchase raffle tickets, and we will announce the winners by email tomorrow. We in the interfaith community are so grateful to leaders like Father Thomas, Imam Elterk, as well as Dion and other interfaith groups. Thank you for your continued dedication to our community. And without further ado, here are our 3 IFLC Award recipients for 2021.
Hi, my name is Reverend Gerald Cardwell, board member of IFLC. It is my honor to introduce you to Father Norman P. Thomas, who was born December 18th, 1930 in Highland Park, Michigan. Father Thomas attended Willard Public School and Madonna Catholic Grade School, graduating from Detroit's Sacred Heart Seminary, high school and college, and the St. John's Theological Seminary in Plymouth, Father Thomas received his master's degree in social work at Wayne State University in 1965. Father Norman P. Thomas was ordained a Catholic priest in 1955. He served as associate pastor in Wyandotte, Pontiac, and Hazel Park. And in 1965, he became the director of Urban Parish Apostolate, which coordinated efforts of the Central City parishes. Father Thomas's main concern since 1968 was being pastor of the Sacred Heart Church in Detroit, where he lives and works till today. 2007, he was appointed pastor of St. Elizabeth Catholic Church as well. Father Thomas was also the chairperson of the Eastern Market Task Force and is the vice chairman of the Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance, chairperson of the Urban Parish Coalition, member of the Interfaith Committee for Workers' Issues, board member of Wayne County Catholic Social Services, chairperson of the Sweat Free World Campaign, and in 2005, Urban League Distinguished Warrior Award. I've known Father Thomas since 2000, and while working with Moses, as we continued together as all of our faiths to speak to the social justice issues and policies of improving the quality of life for all citizens of metropolitan Detroit and the state of Michigan. We later worked together with Michigan Faith in Action, visiting our legislators in Lansing, and with the Poor People's Campaign, a call for more revival as we marched in Lansing and Detroit with all faith traditions for change. Father Thomas was slated to receive the Pastor of the Year Award by the now disbanded Metropolitan Christian Council of Detroit and Windsor at the celebration of its 100th anniversary. Father Thomas's long and faithful ministry serves as evidence of him now being afforded the honor of receiving this award, for being given this IFLC award today. Thank you.
Sacred Heart Church. That was the greatest influence on my life. Knowing people, getting to know the lives of people, everyday living, getting to know the effects of racism on people, getting to know the struggles that people have had, and getting to know the people, some great people, great people. I've got to say that was the greatest influence on my life. A group of priests getting together once a week, going over the scripture, our reflection on it, our how we see it in our everyday life. The Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance was not even named at that time. It was a group of Tuesday morning priests gathering. It grew, and we invited lay people into it. We wanted to broaden the experiences of people and their reflection on the scripture and how we live every day as people of God. Also at that time, in 1988, the announcement of church closings was really a determining pathway for the alliance. We opposed those closings. We marched, we fought, we protested, we took the issue to the civil courts. We won some battles, and we lost a lot of battles on the closing of churches. But that brought together a group of people who, after that closing kind of settled down, remained together and became the Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance, which wanted to move beyond just protesting. We took on some building projects, built homes over on the east side where the headquarters of the Alliance is, Gratiot and McClellan. We began, first of all, by renovating houses. Then we built houses in that area. And then we built buildings. We bought one of the buildings, renovated that. That's the office and has a daycare center in it. Helped build a senior center, apartments. Proud of the buildings we built, but also the coming together of people. I have learned a lot, and I'm still learning from young people. I learned a lot this past summer from young people who went to the streets. They knew what had to be done, and they did it. I followed them. As far as the issues of the Black community, I'm a follower. I lend my support where I think it's needed, and especially people ask to be part of something that I think is good. I'll be there. The term disciple is an interesting thing. Disciple means a student, a learner. And as a disciple, I just feel like this still learning. I think we're making some progress because of the conversation. To our spirituality, it's basic to what we believe. It's basic to what our creed says, and we can use that hope to really open up things and to make changes that need to be changed. But so I see good things. I see great things that have been done by way of interfaith, and I see that the future is the interfaith influence and bringing that power of faith and hope and love. Great things can be done. I appreciate the awards. I appreciate that because even the things that are brought up and as reason for being recognized, there were a lot of people who were involved in that. And I was just probably one of the ones marching along, or one of the ones being part. I appreciate it. But I also appreciate, the fact that could have done more.
Hi, I'm Ruth Turner from the Troy Area Interfaith Group. I joined TIG 13 years ago, and then became part of the IFLC Education Committee and the World Sabbath Planning Committees. The people I've met have been from many different faiths: Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, Christians, Baha'i, Hindu, Jewish, Muslims, Sikhs. I've learned about their interfaith traditions, their cultures, and we've explored how their faith is different and similar from mine. Together, we've worked on programs about not just about our faiths, but issues of social justice we've all faced, and jointly participated in service projects, giving back to our communities. And one of the things that surprised me about interfaith work was that while learning about other faiths, I had to learn more about my faith in order to participate in discussions. And that really was meaningful to me. Anyway, this year, I have the pleasure to introduce Rabbi Dorit of Dion as the group recognized by IFLC as the outstanding interfaith group for their serious effort to build community between the city and suburbs as an interfaith-based program. Dion provides exemplary programs in our school. So thank you and good luck, Dion.
idea for starting Dion came, and I'm going to give them credit, the Landmark Forum and Program for Transformation and Self-Development. And I saw in that leadership capacity that I really wanted to see Detroit become again a great city where my children would want to come back to live. And so I got a bunch of clergy together and we started to talk about how could we work together to transform and help Detroit become a wonderful place to live. Our primary program, I would say, is connected to the schools, and that is the literacy program at Bagley Elementary School, where we have tutors coming when there's no COVID. Janet has organized 12 tutors coming to work with the elementary school kids there.
Tutors got just as much out of it as we did working with the kids. As kids did, hopefully. I'm sure we made a difference in a lot of the kids. They look forward to seeing us. I know that. I'd love to get back to it. But, so I would train the tutors, and this is something I excel in personally. I was able to do it through Dion, and it's a great experience.
We have with Central High School, thanks to Cass for mentioning that, we have been appointed officially their faith-based partner through the Detroit Public Schools Community District, and we bring snack packs because they said that they have hunger issues there among the students. So twice a month we supply them with snack packs to take home on the weekends.
Interfaith work is not so easy. To cross borders between religions and cultures can be challenging, but what Rabbi Dorit has brought to is really a mother's heart. And with her sincerity and embrace, it's really helped people go beyond their everyday experiences to cross over, to experience halal food at the picnic and kosher food and the different faiths presenting their scriptures and testimonies and so on, and music.
We have our big suburban urban unity picnic. We hope to celebrate the 10th one, even though it's not going to be consecutive, August 1st this year. 3 to 4 times a year we do interfaith services at various sites. We have had 2 Zoom services this year just to be able to connect with people.
Just bridging the suburbs with Detroit, ongoing, very needed. The interfaith impact, raising money, whether it's for children, just having snacks to eat, or for the theaters.
I have had a lot of exposure to places where I never went and wanted to go, meeting people, sending other people to the different performance. We get invited to others' programs. And I sent my nephews and nieces to this program. They talked about how much they enjoyed it. They had the chance to meet other children and saw their talents.
In this group, you get a chance to experience a diversity of religions that are out here and help you to understand them and better get along versus having all these phony assumptions, as I can say.
And lastly, we have trips that we take to various faith-based sites, such as the Holocaust Memorial, the African American Museum, the Access site in Dearborn. We went to the Native American site in Centerline. And we have a few others we go to. So these are cultural trips for us to learn about each other's faith and ethnic backgrounds.
It goes beyond just friendship. You actually become part of the family.
I think that Rabbi Dorit, being a rabbi, brings this spiritual influence, the vertical connection with God and heart, and with that horizontally into the practical world. It's a nice balance of both. Important part of why it's successful.
Dion has been kind of a bridging group that way. I love doing that because, you know, I sit there and I say, oh, I know this one and this one and this one can work with this one. And so why not connect them? And that's been one of my fun things, like playing sort of a jigsaw puzzle game.
Well, good evening. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Imam Steve Mustafa Elterk. Steve and I have been friends for, I imagine it's getting close to 20 years, at least 15 anyway. We first met when the Warren community was refusing to accept his mosque. Back in the 2000s, and he called on the interfaith community to give him a hand, and I'm happy that I was one of those people that joined with him then. Steve took that responsibility very seriously of introducing his mosque and Islam to the community in Warren and maybe in the larger community of Macomb, but he also set about to transform the Warren city government at the same time, to really take a conflict and transform it using that energy to make it into something more positive. And he has certainly done that. And he has demonstrated that relationship with the city government. It isn't surprising that we received a letter from the representative for Warren, and Andy Levin. Andy is writing here to congratulate Imam Elterk. He says, "It was my great pleasure to learn Imam Steve Mustafa Elterk will receive this year's Interfaith Leader Award. Imam Elterk is a treasured leader in the 9th District whose work as an imam and organizer and ally has impacted so many. From his work to promote understanding of Islam, to his commitment to organizing across communities, to his strong voice on issues like racial justice and clean, affordable water, Imam Elterk stands out as a true interfaith leader. He leads not only from his wonderful mosque, but in the community and on the streets. It is important for the halls of power to hear from faith leaders like Imam Elterk, who root their spirituality in service of a more just future. In our own friendship, I have always valued the opportunity to hear Imam Elterk's sage thoughts about the state of the world and what we need to do about it." And it's signed by Andy Levin, the representative of the 9th District. There isn't a lot that I need to add to that. I certainly agree with every word of it. He's been a great partner. He follows his own Islamic values and gives an example to all of us. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to know and to call Steve Mustafa Elterk my friend. He is certainly a worthy recipient this year of our Interfaith Leader Award. I'd like to introduce to you now Steve Mustafa Elterk. Thank you.
I came to the United States because of the civil war that erupted in Lebanon in 1974. So my education was one of my priorities. So I got my education, I pursued my music, and I was working as an engineer. I started my own business. I was doing really great. But what kept haunting me all the time was the basic fundamental questions about my identity. You know, I've always questioned my identity, who I really am. why am I here on earth? What purpose do I serve here on this planet? There's got to be something more than just playing music and, having fun and going on vacations and making money. There's got to be something. I decided that I would like for my kids to learn about my faith, because I truly believe that I am responsible for my children on the day of judgment. I dug deeper and deeper into the meaning of the Quran, not only the exegesis in terms of the general meaning, but really try to extract the wisdom of those verses. And the more I got into it, the more I loved it. And then I joined Dr. Ahmed, my scholar, my sheikh, my teacher, and his organization. And then I was, by the time I was with them from 1995, in 1998, I became the Director of Education and Training. And of course, from there on, I became, in 2003, the leader of Imam and President of Iona. And that's how it started, actually. So the journey, of course, I gave up my career in 2007 when we opened up Iona to dedicate myself to, the community, to the religion, to God. And I'm really quite thankful to God for accepting me to do His work and His will here on earth. But I decided to become active in the interfaith community for a couple of reasons. Number one, I found that I need to go out of my community and learn about other communities around me, because now in the larger community, we're all together. We're not just Muslims and Christians and whatever. The other reason is, doesn't matter what you believe in, it is those individuals who will come together to protect the houses of worship. So the Interfaith Partners became the platform for me to join. The Islamic Organization of North America is a non-violent movement whose aim is to promote and struggle for justice. And the letter J, we write it in capital, meaning divine justice. That's the intent behind it. So, as an organization, as a movement that is working to promote the concept and establish the system of justice. So that's where we connect with the interfaith and other, perhaps non-faith organizations that wanted to pursue social justice and work on social justice issues. And even now, IFLC is composed of different faith traditions, which is great, because that is what is needed today. So it was so good to see everybody, great leaders and high-level leaders as well, faith leaders, embrace the mosque, the Islamic Center of America, and show a show of solidarity that we are all here to defend. Of course, the message went out not only to defend the Muslims and the Muslim community, but all religions. But thank you so much for the award. I really appreciate this. This is not for me. This is on behalf of my community and on behalf of the interfaith community. And the struggle must go on.
Congratulations again to Father Turner, to Dion, and to Imam Elterk for your well-deserved, well-earned awards. And thank you so much for your accomplishments and your continued service to IFLC and to the broader community around us. I want to highlight a special project by the IFLC's Health and Healthcare Committee, who's working very hard in our community. While partnering with the Institute of Faith and Resilience, they developed a detailed survey which will be sent to faith leaders across Southeast Michigan. It's a survey which will help us understand the roles of spirituality and religion and identify resources that faith leaders need to build resilience, especially in this time of the COVID-19 global pandemic, but with broad iniquities and political and personal challenges that face us both in our current circumstances and well beyond. If you would like to participate, please email the IFLC by March the 30th, and you can find the email address on the left of your screen right now. The IFLC Education Committee is excited to announce that the Art and Faith film premiere is on Monday, March the 22nd at 7 p.m. Many of the artists that are featured in the film will do a live discussion after the film screening. The video will be available anytime after the premiere for purchase. So look for information about registration on the upcoming IFLC newsletter, as well as on the IFLC website. Just two examples of the diverse and far-reaching IFLC programs that we have for you. Now, I'm sure you want to know how much we've raised so far. Well, as of the tabulation right now, we have raised so far $44,340 tonight. So thank you for what you have already submitted, and we hope that you will also submit some more. We are just a little bit under a third of what our goal is tonight. We have plenty of more exciting news and events to talk about this evening, so we hope that you will be also enthusiastic about your support financially. Please take a moment to donate or to buy raffle tickets on your left. Now, let's enjoy the trailer for the Art and Faith Film Theater.
I'm Morgan Meese. I'm an art critic. This is a project sponsored by the Interfaith Leadership Council of Metropolitan Detroit and the Robert K. Gallery. It presents the work of 10 Detroit area artists working in faith traditions, including Christian, Jewish, and Muslim customs and beliefs. I talked with each artist about their motives, their methods, process, intentions, tried to have a real conversation.
Is there a point where it goes from being a painting to a sculpture if you do a certain, like, how do you keep it a painting?
Okay, it's a painting because you cannot go around it.
Ah.
Or you have to go around it to see it from all angles.
Is there a spirit to a parking lot, or is that without spirit altogether?
You know what? There absolutely is a spiritual presence in the parking lot in downtown Detroit. So it's not necessarily location. There is something sacred if one is quiet enough to listen and find it.
People actually interpreting the artwork are part of even what it is.
I took the story when, Jesus Christ, came to the world, and, the three wise men who came and give him the gifts. Mm-hmm. So I just put three women instead.
Did that process kind of lead you to
Mosaic?
Yeah.
Well, what I will say is that years and years and years of making presentations to potential clients was extremely handy when I went to go for my first, hey, hire me to go do this art piece in your synagogue.
What I did on the seat team, I quizzed a lot of the people I know who are rabbis. I said, can I put silver beads in them? They all gave me a look. I said, there wasn't a prohibition against it. So I wrappings and they put silver beads in.
You were pushing the envelope a little bit here, though.
It's never been about showing. It's never been about selling. It's been about this exploration of my people's memory.
The lines are landmarks. It's easier for you to map out. The idea of removing material and not being able to go back it's a powerful concept.
I had to make it so apparent that someone would carry it with them, not an abstract painting.
This is based on a series I'm started to work. It's called the Sticker Series. It's about today how really we're slapping things together. So as if you take a sticker, you form a sticker and you put it in your computer, you put it on your phone, you put it on your clothes, you're putting it everywhere.
So give me an example of maybe of a sentence from the Quran that you would use.
I like this phrases too much. فاصبر لحكم ربك فإنك بأعيننا. I don't know if you know.
No, you have to translate it for me.
You must be patient because you are in the eyes of God.
I think it makes for an intimate and educational experience. It's a lot of fun. Check it out.
Again, the Art and Faith film premiere will be on Monday, March the 22nd at 7 p.m. So we hope that you will join for that. We're grateful to have the opportunity to hear now from John Powell. After his talk, we will be doing a short question and answer session. So if you have any questions for John, please send them over to us. You can do that by responding to our text about the event or see the email address on the left of your screen. Many of you already are familiar and you know John and his work. He's a native of Detroit who has been a mentor to the Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion and also to the Moses Organization. More recently, he authored a report on the long history of water affordability issues in Detroit. We're very, very grateful to call him our friend and our mentor. As the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute at the University of California at Berkeley, he brings together scholars, community advocates, communicators, and policymakers to identify and eliminate the barriers to an inclusive, just, and sustainable society, and to create transformative change toward a more equitable world. He is internationally recognized as an expert in the areas of civil rights, civil liberties, structural racism, housing, poverty, and democracy. John holds the Robert D. Haas Chancellor's Chair in Equity and Inclusion and is a professor at law, African American Studies, and Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley. John has written extensively on issues of structural racism, racial justice, concentrated poverty, opportunity-based housing, voting rights, and affirmative action. He's the author of several books, including his most recent work, Racing to Justice, Transforming Our Concepts of Self and Other to Build an Inclusive Society. Trust me, the resume is much longer and quite admirable, as you might expect, but I will forego that to say John has been thinking about the issues that concern us, that concern the IFLC, and has been doing so for a very long time. I am certain you will agree that we want to allow as much time as we can to hear from him tonight. Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight, John. We're looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you. Can you make sure I'm here? Earlier, we tried to share my screen unsuccessfully, so let me just try one more time and see if that works. If it doesn't, then we'll proceed without the benefit of a PowerPoint. So I push the buttons and nothing seems to happen. Okay. Well, first of all, it's a delight to be here. Detroit is home. Most of my family still lives in the Detroit area. And Bob and many of you know that my father passed away last year, was a Christian minister for most of his 99 years. And I think the issue that you're dealing with today actually is important in Michigan, but also important across the world. And that is, how do we engage in a productive way across differences? And some of those differences, as you know, take on the form of interfaith. And so I'm going to take a few minutes, about 15 minutes, and just share with you some thoughts, and then I look forward to a conversation afterwards. Part of the thing that's happening in the country right now is that we live in broken containers. So many of the things that held us, that helped us make sense of the world, including our faith, is being called into question. And it's not just called into question because of us, it's sometimes called into question because there are people on the other side who challenge our way of showing up in the world. And in fact, even our right to show up in the world. Well, what happens when the container is broken? Everyone feels like they don't belong. Everyone feels like an outsider. And it's really hard because there are a number of issues at play here. One, of course, is we're not just talking about individuals. We're talking about individuals who are part of larger groups. And sometimes those groups are religious groups. Sometimes they are political groups. And one way you sort of make common cause, if you will, if there's some agreements. But we're increasingly seeing people not agree on meaning, on facts, certainly on spiritual texts. And it creates, again, a great deal of tension. And that tension is exacerbated by what we call othering. When you deny someone else their basic humanity, when you say that another group is less than, and we've all heard and had experiences of this. We just heard in terms of someone trying to move into Detroit and being denied access because of his religion, which is a way of saying you don't belong. This is not your place. And I'm sure you've heard people saying, go back home, wherever home is apparently. We call that othering. And othering is happening all over the world now, not just in the United States. Historically in the United States, the designated other, literally by law, by decree, by practice, were Blacks. Blacks were not considered human, not considered people. There's an argument among some conservatives that we, the people, the Declaration of Independence, clearly could not include Blacks. I don't know how many of you are watching the Lincoln series that's on television now. But when Lincoln made his Gettysburg Address, it was controversial because he referred to the Declaration of Independence and implied that people included Blacks. And a number of newspapers, including out of Chicago, were saying that was just absurd. It's no way. When you have that degree of tension, that degree of disagreement, it's hard to actually, what we call bridge. It's hard to make common cause. Well, what's happening in the world today is speeding up, is creating tensions on all of those factors. When people go through rapid change, they naturally experience anxiety. And that's not true just of people, it's true of animals as well. If you think of Darwin, Darwin's really, his insight was, some people misunderstand it, but survival of the fittest. What he was meaning in part is that those that survive are those who can adapt to the changes in the environment, the social environment as well as the physical environment. And we're going through rapid change right now in at least 4 or 5 areas. Climate change. I'm sitting in California and it's a beautiful day, 75 degrees, but I'm worried about the fires next summer. I'm thinking about the people in Texas and across much of the country experiencing incredibly record-breaking lows. And another one, of course, is technology. We are communicating with each other through platforms, and that's a good thing, but it also disrupts our lives and has implications for what it means to be fully human. And then, of course, there's the changing demographics. When the country was founded, even though the founders were set in terms of creating not a theocracy, the country was founded largely by Christians. And even among those Christians, there were huge fights. So I'm old enough to remember when John F. Kennedy was running for president, and the question among Christians was, could a Catholic be president? And a lot of people said no. When President Obama was running for office, one of the biggest questions was, is he a Muslim? What the implication was that if he's a Muslim, he can't be president. He's the designated other. So the demographic change is creating tremendous anxiety. What you do with that anxiety, though, is social. So the anxiety is, in a sense, biological. All mammals, when the change happens too fast or very fast, it stresses out their system, the nervous system. What you do with that anxiety is social. And there are two major ways you can deal with anxiety. One is whatever is causing the anxiety, and within the story, there's always people. So even though I talk about technology and climate change, the most pronounced anxiety that we focus on is anxiety caused by people. We talk about the changing demographics. We talk about relationship between different religious groups. We talk about relationships between different racial groups. And for some people, those differences are categorical. They cannot be bridged. We need to build walls, not bridges. For others, we need to build bridges. And I think the Interfaith Council plays a critical role in that, because people don't naturally fall on one side or the other. It is true, people who are inclined toward authoritarian personalities are more likely to break, that is, see the other as a threat and see the future as a threat. Because in authoritarian personalities, people have a hard time processing change. But that's only about 25% of the population. But the stress that we're feeling is much broader than that. So one story is that the world is changing and you should be afraid. There are people who don't look like us, who don't talk like us, who don't eat like us, who don't dress like us, who worship God differently than us if they worship God at all. And in that story is that they are a threat to who we are. That's breaking. There's another story which said, yes, the world is changing, we're becoming more diverse, but it's also full of riches. It's full of learning, full of mystery, it's an opportunity to invite a new future. And that future is not our future or their future. It's all of our futures. And we co-create that future together. That's called bridging. So at one extreme, you have bridging, which basically says, we can tell a new story. We can augment that story. We can tell a story together where we live together and sometimes worship together, go to school together. And we don't become each other, but we can appreciate each other. The other story is that no, the other is a threat. And we need to keep him or her at bay in their own country, in their own community, in their own school. And both of those stories are populating the country right now. And I would say the country and much of the world is evenly split. Where do we get those stories from? Well, those stories are largely told by leaders. People don't derive at these stories by themselves. So one of the roles of leaders is both to tell the story, but also to engage in the practice so people can imagine one set of possibilities or another. And unfortunately, it's sometimes easier to imagine the negative than the positive. There's some social science that suggests that fear travels faster than other emotions. So you have your work cut out for you. And religion can be a tremendous crucible and fountain for good, but as we all know, it can also be a tremendous divide. And so which of those stories will prevail? And I've written that in Western society, we are obsessed with who belongs, and we're obsessed with separation. When my father was alive, I asked him, question. I said, so what is death and what is sin? And he was a Christian minister. And he said, sin and death are essentially the same. There's separation. And we talk about a number of separations in Western society. We talk about separation from nature, separation from God, separation from each other, and then even separation from ourselves. And in the sense that separation creates deep anxiety and deep fear. So part of the healing requires that we deal with that separation. Now, one way that we try to deal with separation in America, at least until recently, when we see another person's race, their sexual orientation, we'd say they're just like us. The argument would be we should at least tolerate them because actually they're just like us. And I call that saming. And I assert that the problem of othering is not fixed by saming. And that tendency is actually quite strong. In a sense, we're afraid of differences. So we actually insist that a mosque is just like a synagogue, it's just like a church, it's just like a temple. And certainly there are some similarities, but certainly there are some differences. And so what we want to move to is belonging. And belonging is different than inclusion. Belonging not only acknowledges, belonging is basically saying we co-create the thing we belong to. There's a group I work with called Welcoming America, Welcome to America. And it's works largely with immigrant populations, and I'm working with them. And I said, you know, that's great. That's really a move in the right direction. But it's a limited move because we're saying we are welcoming you to our neighborhood. We're welcoming you to our school. We're welcoming you to our city. But what if it wasn't just welcoming? What if you're a participant that as groups come in, and this is one of the stories of America, as new groups come in, they don't just come in as invited guests, or in some cases uninvited guests. They come in as co-creators. They get to help remake America. They get to help reimagine America. They get to help to sort of think about a future, not just for them, but for all of us. And that's what belonging is about. That's the heart of belonging. And that's what makes belonging different than even inclusion. And one of the books I looked at, preparing for my talk today, was a book called God is Not One. And the author argues that he looks at 8 major religions, and he argues that in some ways, religions are helping people with the problem of meaning, and if you could say belonging. But in response to some articulated or at least heartfelt question, and that if you look at the 8 major religions, each of them was actually dealing with a different question, and therefore they had a different practice, and to some extent a different aspiration. So, for example, and according to him at least, Christianity was based on the notion of the original sin. In many ways, that's the only religion of the 8 major religions that's organized around that problem, the original sin. Jews recognized, yes, there was a sin in terms of eating the apple or the fruit, but it wasn't inherited. So it wasn't a problem in terms of Judaism. The problem for Judaism was being kicked out of the garden and then kicked out of Egypt and being wanderers. So the problem of land and a place to belong became the central problem. For Islam, the issue was arrogance. And so not sinfulness, but arrogance, unwilling to submit to Allah, which is very different than being concerned about a sin. Buddhism, and I could go on, half Buddhists said they don't believe in God. That the major problem in life is not sin, it's not finding a place to call your home, and it's about suffering. And therefore, the practice in many ways is to understand the cause of suffering, which is ignorance, and to quiet that. I only share this to say it's hard to build something together when the foundations are so different, when the understanding of the problem is so different, when the understanding of the practice is so different. when what's considered the sacred text is so different. Now, you've obviously figured out a way to do that because you already have an organization. But for the average Christian, Jew, Muslim, it doesn't make sense to say that all the groups are the same. And maybe they shouldn't be said all the same. It shouldn't be that the difference itself is the problem. So how do you deal with people who have different practices, different sacred texts? Well, one of the ways you deal with it is you bring people together among some common project. And so that they can hear each other's stories, so that they can participate in each other's lives. And your honoree has always reflected that. So a deep friendship happens when you come together and do common work. Unfortunately, we don't have a chance to come together enough. Religion and bridging, and I'll give you my PowerPoint because I have examples of bridging among all the different religions, and I won't read it now just for the sake of time. But the big picture is the big picture. How do you actually hold on to your own faith, your own set of beliefs, and build bridges to others? How do you actually lift up the best out of your religion and acknowledge that every religious history has some stuff that most of us would like to sweep under the rugs? And so what I'm suggesting then is your work is central for a lot of reasons. People are meaning-making animals. We need purpose. And religion has been the crucible that's held us. But now we have these crucibles sort of fighting with each other. And in that fight, we deny each other our common humanity. And sometimes we think our differences are natural or inevitable. They're always shifting. They're always changing. And what's not changing or shifting so much is that people's need for some sort of crucible, people's need for some sort of grounding, people's need for meaning in life, whether they are consider themselves a theist or an atheist. We're still constantly searching for meaning. And so I think that the work you're engaged in, especially in Michigan, which is the epicenter for a lot of this conflict, is really, 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 really critical. And I applaud your doing the work and would be happy to help in any way we can at the Othering and Belonging Institute. So I'll stop there and open it up for comments and questions.
Insight into such an important topic, which intersects so many of the big challenges that it seems like we're finding. And I really took a lot from your identifying the big challenges, demographic shifts, tech shifts. There's even speculation that the magnetic fields are going to switch from the North and the South Pole. I think that's more than just a metaphor. But the idea then that we are beings in motion, we are spirits in motion, and at times it feels like the globe is a snow globe that's been shaken, and we're trying to figure out where all the little flakes come down. So thank you for that insight, and thank you for your questions, everyone who's been watching. We'll go ahead and pick some out and hopefully explore them with John. Those that we are not able to reach, stay tuned because we'll provide answers in our upcoming IFLC newsletter issue. So John, one of the questions deals with instinct and survival. From Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's at the very bottom of the pyramid. And protecting ourselves and our family, if you want to call it tribalism, seems to be instinctive. Is othering a part of human nature then? Is it part of that primordial instinct?
It's a great question, and it comes up frequently, and oftentimes people misunderstand it. So the process of othering, if you will, even categorizing, we seem to be hardwired for that. That's the bad news. Good news is we also seem to be hardwired to connect with others. We're social beings. So we have more than one impulse, and those impulses are moved in different directions. And which of those impulses actually prevail at any given time depends on many things, including the story we're living in. And one of the, you know, and I know you don't quote unquote think of it as a story, but in a way, religion has been one of those great stories. It's actually helped people to come together. So when people think about the instinct to actually be tribal, tribes were generally 50 people. A big tribe, huge tribe, would be 150 people. That's it. That's the outer limits. So how do you have a tribe of almost 2 billion Christians? How do you have a tribe of 1.5 billion Muslims? How do you have a tribe of 14 million Jews? Those are not tribes in the sense that evolutionary biologists are talking about. What allows people who will never see each other, speak a different language, eat different food, all come together around under the rubric of Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism? That's a different. So there's something going on that's actually quite beautiful. And what evolutionary biologists think is going on is that people, it's sort of interesting, I'll just take you down this rabbit hole a little bit. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals roamed the earth at the same time. There's actually some indication now they had families. But we normally think of Neanderthals as the dumber of the two. Turns out evolutionary biologists are rethinking that. What they think now is that Homo sapiens were the slower physically, slower mentally, smaller brains, less power. And early on, when the two would come together in a conflict, Neanderthal would always prevail. So what happened? Well, here's the theory that sometime pretty late in Homo sapiens development, they developed 2 new capacities. One capacity was to actually imagine things unseen. Now, right now, it's like we do that all the time, so we don't think of it as something relatively new, but it is relatively new according to evolutionary biologists. The second thing that Homo sapiens developed was the ability to tell stories. They took those 2 abilities, the ability to imagine and the ability to tell stories, to create not a tribe of 50 or 150, but to create a tribe of 1,000. So now it was 1,000 Homo sapiens in conflict with 50 Neanderthals. And so one of our really amazing human gifts is the ability to tell stories. We can tell stories where we're deeply connected, or we can tell stories where we're deeply afraid of each other. That's not given. That's indeterminate. That's what you guys do. That's why people come to you. It's like, I'm having trouble with my life. Help me make sense of it. And one way of doing it is that, well, it's those people over there, they're the reason that your job is not what it used to be, or that your school is not working. Or it could be, yes, there's a scary time. But the best way to deal with it is, instead of turning on each other, it's a turn toward each other. So yes, that tendency to categorize and even other is there, but so is that tendency to connect and develop inner relationships.
I was struck in reading Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens, when he mentions that human beings are the only species that have been determined to produce fiction. It just created this light bulb for me, thinking, wow, I mean, yes, of course, not all the fiction is really good, but occasionally you'll find a good book, maybe not a bestseller. But I'm struck.
It's myth, right?
It's myth.
Which is sometimes more true than truth. So we are constantly, our imagination is one of our really incredible gifts. Can we use it for good?
Well, part of it is just how compelling these stories are, John. I mean, I think back in my childhood, and some of the most interesting stories for me were Greek mythology. And then I noticed this common thread about stories that involved religion or religious figures. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why religions have stood the test of time, because their storytelling and the stories themselves are so compelling and are able to for lack of better words, stay on the bestseller list.
Right, and I think that's right. I mean, Freud, who was somewhat antagonistic to religion, he said if it didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. He's saying it's actually responding to some deep human need. So it's not something we can get rid of. And it's responding at a deeply emotional, psychological, even spiritual level. So yes, so a really compelling story. It's just really wonderful. And I oftentimes say to my students, and I say, so who was the Caesar when Jesus was in Rome? I don't know. Here's the most powerful person on earth, apparently. No one even knows his name. But everybody knows Jesus' name.
What a great point. So sticking on this theme of stories, one of the issues that's part of a discussion of othering is exclusion. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very easy when we're taking a look at our own story to regard it as just being an autobiography. Mm-hmm. Whereas life and its complexities and its connections may be better seen as an edited volume, mm-hmm. Where you have many chapters of many people that are involved. Nonfiction, not fiction. Mm-hmm. Do we need to actively then work toward the kind of belonging that you described? And is part of that solution moving away from looking at life autobiographically to one where we're looking at a collective, an anthology?
Right, right. No, I think that's right. I think, there's some philosophers who says if, we're deeply social beings, and we know that when something bad happens, and we're trying to, something good happens, we're trying to make meaning of it. What do? Most of us don't go sit quietly in our room. We go talk to our best friends. We go talk to our wives and our husband. We go talk to our kids, say, something just happened. I'm trying to make sense of this. And they say, oh, Dad, you got that wrong, So I often say to my students, intelligence is a team sport. We play this together. We interact together when we're doing it well. And our stories, we don't construct them by ourselves. We're building, we're engaging, we're imagining, all with other people. And so can we imagine a world where everybody belongs? Some people say no, but some others say yes. But if we're going to imagine such a world, we have to have, as you suggested, stories that fit that world, stories that fit people's lives, stories that reflect the meaning, the experience that people are having, as well as their aspirations and their suffering. So it's not, it's different than fiction and narrative, right? It's something else. And there's a mystery, and we have to help people become comfortable in that mystery.
These days, the word belonging sometimes has attached with it this other concept of FOMO, a fear of missing out. And that suggests a kind of desperation or a neediness to belong. Is there a way to get to belonging that doesn't involve perhaps that insecurity to be left out, that people can come together with a true sense of equality and have that be meaningful belonging?
That's a great question. So the name of our institute is the Othering and Belonging Institute. We changed our name about 2 years ago. And some people say, well, why are we putting othering in there at all? Why don't we just go straight to belonging? I always felt that there's so much suffering and violence in the world in the name of othering, and that you needed a counterpart. So this is not, even though it may sound like it, this is not sort of woo-woo. This is actually talking about the experience of being denied a loan, talking about the experience of being turned away at the border, talking about the experience of being discriminated against on the job, talking about the experience. So in a sense, we could hold both. And you mentioned Maslow earlier. So Maslow's students basically say Maslow got it wrong. So his hierarchy of needs, he talked about survival. He talked about survival and physical safety, food. And third on his triangle was belonging. A lot of his students say the belonging is first. Because if you don't belong, you don't get food. If you don't belong, you don't get safety. And we actually do need each other. I mean, literally, not figuratively, literally, we come in the world attached to another being. And that attachment takes many different forms. So yes, I think people can be whatever, but I would say take people where they are. I mean, there's a lot of trauma in the world, and when people are traumatized, I wouldn't try to talk them out of it. People need sometimes just an ear to listen to, a shoulder to cry on. And then some people are more comfortable in their body and in their community. Those are people who maybe can give salve to those who are not.
So I'm glad that you mentioned level 3 in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because it occurs to me that some societies may have a different starting point than others. For some, it perhaps is a matter of survival, which they see as being a very individualistic imperative, a very competitive one. And yet you also have societies where the sense of community and belonging is already there, and then everything else builds on it. So when we have these kinds of differences or this kind of diversity, is it possible for groups to come together, whether it's virtually now with tech or in the physical space, provided right now we have social distancing, but hopefully in the very near future coming back together? Can people belong when they have different starting points?
I think yes. The short answer, I think, is yes. And I mean, we all have to some extent different starting points. We talked about divisions between different religions, but we can talk about divisions within religions. Every major religion has multiple divisions within it. You don't have to go, across the world or even across the street. So there's some psychologists that say that within a half an hour interview, they can tell you if a couple who are married, newly married, are going to make it or not. You know how they tell? And they've been pretty accurate. The probability is well over 90%. Within 20 to 30 minutes. They say the most important thing is not what they agree on, it's how they deal with disagreement. And there will be disagreement in our lives. There's not only disagreement with each other, there's disagreement within ourselves. We're conflicted. We call it ambivalence. So how do we deal with that? How do we hold? And so I wrote a piece some time ago. I said, love moves beyond understanding. You understand someone, it makes sense to you. What happens when they don't make sense? And I have children, and sometimes they don't make sense. So do I stop loving them? It's like, you're not making sense. So the capacity to love, not just children, each other, nature, without necessarily understanding, without necessarily dominating. And I think even with people who organize around individualism, we all need to be recognized. Some of the research they've done on that is quite profound. And one of the things that's so disruptive and nefarious about solitary confinement in prison, one of the things that's been hard about the pandemic is people not having access to each other. I have a friend who's super rich. He flies around in his private jet. But he says he's missing, he's from New York. He says he's missing just seeing people on the subway, not talking to them, not taking them home, just being around people. So if someone wants to go off and be by themselves, we have to afford for them to do that. But most of us, when we really look at it, we have some need of each other. And a lot of what we think of as independent or even individuality is really an expression of fear. That if I become vulnerable to you, if I become dependent on you, and the history of that is quite strong. In the United States, one reason that we're so deeply organized around individuality is the fear that if we needed something, if we were dependent on something, we'd fall into slavery. So slavery actually was one of the crucibles that actually puts the United States to hyper-individualism. It was a reaction. It was a fear.
Wow, fascinating. I hope your friend is taking solace by listening to Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence, because that certainly speaks to a trip in the subway these days. So I'm intrigued by the idea then of how in the major religions, the 8 that you identified, especially, but of course, across the board, is this idea of patience. And we see this in the so-called Eastern religions. We see this, of course, in Abrahamic faiths and in everything in between, that there are no quick, quote-unquote, fixes. How do we, in this world of everything being at light speed, allow ourselves and allow others through patience, as you said with children, to articulate themselves, to process difference, to reach that point of belonging?
Right. That's a beautiful question. And what it makes you think of is both sacred and awe. And almost every practice of the sacred requires slowing down. It's not like, oh, it's not a tweet, right? It's like, it's just being with something. Sometimes it's repetition, where you're chanting or praying, saying something over and over again. Almost all the major religions, even those who aren't theistic, have this sort of deliberately slowing down. And in that slowing down, we connect in a different way. And when we're agitated and speedy, literally, it's actually creating stresses on the body. And so our society is not organized that way. Our society is organized for hyperspeed. I think it's, there's a lot that's wonderful about the society, but there's a lot that's very problematic. The suicide rate is skyrocketing. The people are dying of loneliness, which was not true a few years ago. In England, they're actually talking about creating a ministry, government cabinet post, the deputy of loneliness. Right. So, and part of, I lived in Africa for a while, also lived in India. And one of the things I learned in Africa, which was interesting, when I went there, I wanted to borrow some sugar or whatever. And I went to my neighbor's house. There would be this long salutation. Harbarikani. It's like you go, how are you? How are your children? How are you? It's like it would take 5 or 10 minutes, right? And then you get the sugar and leave. And you realize, oh wait, flour too. And you go back over there 5 minutes later, the same thing. You have to do the same thing. When I came back to the United States after being gone for years and seeing old friends, it was like, well, let's get to work. There was no check-in. There was no, how are you? And at that moment, just from being away from the United States for 3 or 4 years, it struck me how transactional we were, how hard it was for us to slow down and just check in. How you doing? And we just had part of an experiment. We worked with a number of organizers called deep canvassing. And deep canvassing is when you go out and talk to people. And unlike traditional canvassing, instead of being 3 to 5 minutes, it can be 45 minutes to an hour. And it works. That's the thing that's amazing. It works because you slow down and you see the person. The person is seen. So you don't walk up and say, what candidate are you for? What issue are you for? You walk up and say, how you doing? You need anything? How's your family dealing with COVID? Do you have masks? And the person just opens up. And they found that approach was more than 100 times more effective than the traditional approach. There's a contradiction here because when you're really opening up to someone, when you're really present, when you're really slowing down with someone, you can't really be doing it just as a technique. I'm going to pay attention to you so I can change you.
Well, it also exposes a vulnerability that some people don't want to reveal, to make the ask.
Right. Yeah. And what they found is that not only does it work on the person you're talking to, it actually changes the questionnaire as well. So the ability to slow down and be with the sacred. And some people believe things are sacred because we slow down. Attention to them that helps make them sacred. I think there's a lot of work to do because that's not valued in our society where everything is about speed and sound bites.
Speed, sound bites, and monetization seems to be the issue. So how can we think of someone with whom we do not agree as not being the other? I mean, specifically, for example, here's a question. What is the connection that we can have with people with whom we may not be a member of their group, but who would like for you to take responsibility for your group? Is that bridgeable?
Well, we don't know entirely such things. The good news is we have many parts of our identity. You know, we may be a church member, but we also may be a businesswoman or man. We may be a parent. We may be an avid jogger. We may be vegetarian. We may be depressed. We may be happy. We may be a traveler. And so, you know, and that's a good thing, right? So we have all these identities. And when we meet someone and we think of them as other, we flatten their identity. That's a white person. That's all I see. I don't see other parts of their being. One of the phenomena of othering people is that we flatten them. We don't see them in their complexity. And so part of bridging is actually giving us a chance to see the person in the complexity. In that complexity, there's almost always something that happens where we can connect. Almost. One thing that makes it hard in this environment is there are a number of experiments on this. Individuals coming together under the right circumstances can almost always connect. But we don't have the right circumstances. So if I have a leader who tells me not only I should not connect with you, but if I do connect with you, I'm going to get kicked out of my group, then my belonging to a group is predicated on my othering another group. You know, you got to hate those people, and if you're going to be in this group, you know, we can't have any, you know, people who like Black people. Think about the South. If you had a relationship with a Black person who were white, you pay the cost. Or if I've seen this happen today, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and so people get their cues from their leader. The leader tells a story, and the leader can tell a story that bridges or that breaks. The leader can tell a story that opens up to people or that punishes people. Or you hang out with gay people, you're not a part of this group anymore. You got to get out of this group. And I think that's sometimes why people leave churches, synagogues, mosques, is that I couldn't be myself there because the cost there. So I think that if we create the right container, and I think it's not just an individual at a structural level, at a jobs level, you get rewarded, opening up to people, and you get punished. So I think there's a lot that can be done. Will we hit some walls? Probably. That's okay. We're doing this in part because I think when we bridge and connect with people, first of all, I think we are connected. But when we live that, I think it enhances our own humanity. We're not just.
So one example of that would be group historical oppression. Must historical trauma be brought out into the open in order to create belonging? I mean, to borrow from poker, do you have to flip the hold card first?
It's actually complicated. I mean, you asked a great question. So if you think about many of the major religions, they're organized around, if you will, trauma, right? The Passover, you know, the crucifixion of Jesus, you know, some of the, you know, so what I'm saying, Buddha recognizing that everybody's dying. So we do have traumas. And in fact, in some ways, our traumas are part of our collective stories. But here's the thing about what makes it feel less traumatic is that if you're in a community that holds it together, then it can be held. If you're by yourself, if the trauma is being used, what trauma does is in some ways, it's a physical reaction to something bad. And then that physical reaction, parts of the brain get shut down. We literally cut ourselves off from each other and ourselves. And so part of it is to help make meaning of it. And yes, a person may be too traumatized to be engaged in bridging with others, but most of us are not, and especially as a group. And when we do tell our stories, we're still in Black History Month. So tell the story of enslaved people in the United States. Powerful story. It's not a story about Africans, it's a story about America. This is a story about America. But we need to tell the story in such a way that we both tell the truth and we don't demonize all the white people. We don't assume that because most of the slave owners, not all, but most of the slave owners were white, slavery was an institution supported by an ideology that still live with us today. But when I'm telling my story of suffering, the question is, am I willing to listen to your story? Or is it only my story that gets validated?
Excellent. So we have someone who's asked that her faith was increased by Interfaith Association. And so building on that, how can we expand the reach of interfaith groups, especially with IFLC and the work that it does? And has recent politics changed the rules of engagement and the dynamics of that engagement?
Well, to start with the latter part of your question, we just watched the country be split almost 50-50. And at least some, I forget the exact number, between 30 and 40% of people who associate themselves with Trump will also associate themselves with white feminists. That's new. And some people say, no, it's the same old thing. He just brought it out. No, it's new. If you go back 20 years, that number was 5%. Now it's between 20 and 30, and that's between 30 and 40%. And in that, give you a concrete example. You're in Michigan. The wearing of masks between the willingness to wear masks for Republicans and Democrats was essentially the same until Trump said, I'm not wearing a mask. Then his supporters all said, I'm not wearing a mask either. He politicized it. He even weaponized it. So yes, it is different. But I'm saying people are looking for something different. People are grasping for something different. And part of it is, I think, the work that you guys do. I become close with a number of people who are quote unquote conservative, not because we agree on taxes or the size of government. We agree on our basic love of humanity. This one guy, I'm thinking of Arthur Brooks, I'll mention his name. He's the head of American Enterprise Institute, which is the largest think tanks in the country. He loves jazz. There are different ways we can come together. And there are different ways we can fight. Ezra Klein's in this book, Why We Polarize, he knows that you can pick a fight over anything. I don't like the way you wear your hair. I don't like those glasses. He talks about fights between vegetarians and vegans. Now most people is like, what? Or you can bridge. And so part of it is helping people do that, creating containers, creating structures and events, creating stories. But unfortunately, right now, there's an ascendance of people who are telling stories about the destructive others, telling stories about others want to rape our women, bring in drugs, want to take our jobs, want to destroy our way of life. Of course, if that's true, why would I like that person? Why would I invite them to the country?
I always am struck by when I read Gulliver's Travels, and Gulliver comes to one island and he sees two warring factions arguing about whether the egg should be this way or the egg should be this way. Right. And it's hard not to wake up some mornings and feel as though we're still in that. But I think from what you're saying, John, how, again, important stories are, and respecting other people's stories, and realizing what is our place in other people's stories, theirs in ours, and most importantly, always being the authors of our own stories. So I want to thank you, John, not only for your wonderful words today, for the inspiration that they draw, but also for the work that you do at Berkeley and well beyond. Hopefully when things loosen up, I'd love to come see you at Berkeley. I think you and I have actually met at a conference, at the Islamophobia conference in past years. And if you can keep a couple of cafes open, I know Cafe Mediterrano and Au Cocolet have unfortunately suffered because of COVID, but I'm sure there'll be a new opportunity. So thank you again for joining us with IFLC.
Thank you. And just to finish, one closing thought, it's not impossible, but it's harder to hate up close. And so part of it is we can bring people together so they have some shared experience. It makes it easier for them to see that we also have a shared humanity. But thank you for your work. And, appreciate you. And I think you're part of the hope for Michigan and the world.
Let's hope so. Thank you again, John.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, John Powell, for a wonderful insight into the importance and at the same time the challenges that face the interfaith community when it comes to engagement, when it comes to understanding, as John described, the notions of othering, the notions of belonging, the predicaments and the promises of them both. We'd like to thank you for your donations. Tonight we have raised $44,875 so far. As a thank you, we will be mailing you a beautiful interfaith calendar. And again, this is your last chance for those raffle tickets. Remember, one for $5, five for $20. Get in line to try to win some wonderful Amazon gift cards. And we will be closing our raffle at 9:30 tonight so that we can announce the winners by email tomorrow. And remember, you can always contact IFLC if you would like to go ahead and make a donation to support our fundraising and our friend-raising efforts here. So thank you again, both for your generosity, not just with your donations, but also with your time, as well as your prayers, your thoughts, and your commitment to interfaith work, interfaith engagement, and to the Interfaith Leadership Council. On behalf of everybody here at IFLC, again, we wish you a very, very warm evening, and peace and blessings be unto all of you. Thank you.